Hi, my name is Iannielli, and I just wanted to make another video. I'm trying to do my best for my son, my family. I'm trying to be strong emotionally. I want to do several things in my life for my son, myself, my family, and I have to be strong. I have to be courageous. I have to take on life's challenges to the best of my ability. I am going through difficulties, and I'll be honest with you, and I believe I'm not the only one. I'm sure there are many people struggling to make their obligations each month, like I have to. Unfortunately, when I came out back in 2012, I didn't realize the impact negatively that would result in the aftermath. I was naive to the point that I figured if I came out as male to female transgender, that people would understand, my employer would understand, my family, specifically my sisters, would understand, and people who I thought were friends would understand. But the sad reality of it all is that all the things that I had hoped for did not fit into place the way I would have liked it to. First off, I lost my job in a firm in Bohemia, New York, where I put my best effort forward. I even worked on Saturdays, and I had just come off tax season working at a CPA firm, so I thought that I would finally have my Saturdays to myself. But that wasn't the case, because this job that I had accepted through the help of the CPA firm I used to work at required 6-day work week, including Saturdays. So I was disappointed, to say the least, because I used to like to go out with my son, and well, that was when he was home, because at that time he was still going to residential school. No, I'm mistaken. No, he didn't start going to residential school until around 2015. But regardless, I like to spend time with him, going out to movies, getting something to eat. But working at this company required that I work on Saturdays and basically give them a full work day, 9 to 5. So when I got home, I would be tired and I wouldn't be able to do what I normally would if I wasn't working on Saturdays. The other thing is that when I originally came out, I spoke to the Human Resources Department, and this is a small company, so their Human Resource Department was really only one person, and she handled all of the issues that would come up with respect to employees. So I was somewhat nervous, but I needed to be truthful and tell them my personal situation. So I had indicated to the office manager and the woman involved in payroll-related matters, so personal in nature, would understand and be supportive. Initially, they weren't, but after a while, they did come around, and they were going to allow me to stay and work unfortunately, the CPA firm that was responsible for getting me this position, which I worked for almost 10 years at the CPA firm, convinced the owner and the office manager that they couldn't see my transition as helpful to the image of the company. So they convinced the office manager that they should reconsider their coming around to allow me to stay. So with that said, I was then in a discussion, I was told that they didn't see my transition as being helpful to the image of the company. And so I was heartbroken, but the partner at the CPA firm told me that they had a replacement position for me, which was a pediatrician's office in Manhattan, and that they were open-minded to me working there as a male to female transgender woman. So obviously I had to meet with the practice manager, and I went to the interview with a suit and tie because I really didn't know how to dress. And besides the point, I didn't resemble a woman in any way. I had short haircut, brown, and I obviously didn't pass as a female to begin with because I was very early into my transition. So I interviewed with them and they seemed interested, and they said to me, they were under the assumption that I was going to present as female. And at the end of the interview, they said, well, you're wearing a men's suit and tie, so you're having a change of heart in working as the woman that was discussed with us. And I said, well, I'm just not comfortable yet presenting as a female because I'm only early into my transition. So I left it at that. They were interested in me working there as a controller. And then the Friday before I was going to start work on the Monday, they called me and they said, so you got the job and we just want to know, how do you intend to present? And I had to make a decision on the drop of a dime, basically, and I really wasn't sure how to answer. But I decided to go with what my heart felt, and I said that I would present in a feminine way as a woman. And they said, fine. And they said, we'll see you on Monday. So I was a little confused. I didn't know exactly how this was all going to work out. I didn't look anything like a woman at the time. So obviously I did have a wig, because on my few times out in public, I obviously had to wear like a disguise, a wig. And when I wore a dress and the wig and all, I kind of blended in, even though I was very self-conscious. Obviously I had to go to the women's restroom because of the way I was dressed. So that was very intimidating initially, but I was kind of looking forward to the fact that I was going to finally be able to present as I had always hoped to. So the first day I went, the practice manager welcomed me and introduced me to the staff that I would be working with, and also introduced me to the owner of the pediatric offices, because they had multiple locations, and they were planning to expand in Los Angeles, California, and they had many offices in New York City. And he was also involved in creating a restaurant. So he was into a lot of ventures. And, it was a brief introduction to the owner. Basically, the office manager said, this is Emily. She's going to be working with us now in the accounting department as controller. And he shook my hand and said, welcome. That was really the only interaction that I had with him. And, I was nervous, but I felt hopeful. And I would come to work every day, and I would be at my absolute best, and I would slowly get into working with all of the employees. The office to me wasn't really that comfortable because basically we were on top of each other, and it was hard to concentrate and roll up my sleeves, so to speak, even though I wasn't wearing a shirt. I thought it was curious as to why I didn't have a phone already set up. And I asked the office manager, I'm planning to have communications with people outside of the department at times, like to ask for confirmation on things, to speak to employees at a different location if necessary. And the office manager said, okay, we'll have to get you set up with the phone. They basically sat me down in front of a computer terminal next to other employees, and they kind of briefly told me what I would be responsible for doing. And basically that was my first day. I had to fill out all the necessary paperwork for tax deductions, giving contact person in the event of an emergency, signing various employee-related forms. And after all that, I was basically starting looking at their manual and getting myself acquainted to the employees and to basically what I would be involved in for what I was hired for. So as time went on, I thought it was a little strange that there was absolutely no contact between me and the owner, who originally was from France. He studied in France at medical school, and he had a practice in his home country, and decided that he wanted to move to the United States and set up an office in New York. And he wrote a book. He was published. He was predominantly recognized within the pediatrics field of medicine. And as time went on, he expanded his one location to several locations over time. And basically, that first initial meeting with him, I thought that I would be seeing him on a more regular basis. But then I felt there was something odd, because when they had business meetings, they never invited me to sit in on them, like I did at my previous employer in Bohemia. And I felt like I wasn't part of their department, because I felt like I was being ignored for some reason. But I did my job. I did what was expected of me. I really had only contact with the employees in my immediate work location and the practice manager, who basically was in the same area. And I started to get accustomed to what was expected of me. I was starting to speak amongst the employees and basically doing a lot of data entry and proposing several ways of presenting numbers in a financial statement, balance sheet, income statement, um, doing projections, working in regard to the company's accounting needs with relation to all of their offices. Uh, and initially developing um, accounting system for his restaurant that he was branching into, and also working on his personal taxes. And all of this was in conjunction with working with the CPA firm that I used to work for, because the company now that I was working for, the pediatrics office, uh, was also a client of the CPA firm. And they were responsible for getting me the position there. So, as time went on, and realizing that I wasn't welcome in business meetings, which I couldn't figure out why, and the fact that they didn't even get me a phone until after a month being there, which I thought was very odd, I just accepted it. I really didn't think too much into it. But then I started to get a little anxious, because when you're working in a accounting related function, generally you play a major part in meetings. Usually they give you a voice to speak with regarding policies and procedures, and also to give updates on what you were doing. But I never had that experience with them. And after 6 months went by, and this was a very tough winter when I worked there, because we had like snowstorms after snowstorms. It was a very bad winter, so we got excused from work for several snow days. And I believe it may have been around the same time, if memory serves me correctly, of the superstorm Sandy. But I'm just thinking that was when I was working there. I'm not 100%. But in any event, we did have lots of storms that affected our ability to come in and do work. So there were times I felt like I needed to stay overtime. And the job wasn't really a 9 to 5 job. There were many times that I stayed in the office till like 7. So I never had a job where I just went in at 9 and left at 5. Between all of the employees that I work for, and with the accounting firms specifically, during regular seasons, not including tax season, I still worked from roughly 8:30 for the CPA firm till around 6:30, which wasn't too bad. But during tax season, I worked as late as 11 p.m. So I would be in the office at 9, even earlier sometimes, and I wouldn't leave until after 11. And my son was struggling with his autistic background, and I felt like I wasn't there to give my wife and my son the emotional support that they needed. And it frustrated me. And I was going to support group meetings that I couldn't go to because of the times I had to spend in the office. So going back to the pediatrician's offices, I was working late too there, as well as the prior job, like I said, where I worked 6 days a week. Um, so I never had that luxury of just going in at 9 and being able to leave at 5 and not bringing the office work home with me like I had to in other firms and organizations. So after 6 months of not being participating in office meetings and really getting the cold shoulder from the office, the owner, I started to worry because I wasn't sure if my job was secure. And I did realize that if I lost this job, I would be in a very difficult situation because I was earning enough money to keep up with all my expenses and barely getting by, basically. Because when I was working for the CPA firm, I was making a higher salary, plus I was getting bonuses after tax season, a Christmas bonus, which was generous, that I could not achieve working at the engineering firm in Bohemia or the pediatrician's office. I substantially took pay cuts, which when you're maturing in your career, it should be the other way, where you get pay increases as you move on. But I was going backwards. And it became more stressful for me because now I was making less, but I still had all of the burdens of expenses, monthly obligations, and literally I had to delay paying some of the bills. But I tried to make the best of it, and I was responsible with all my bills and obligations. So if I couldn't pay this month, I would find a way to pay the next month. So after 7 months, the office manager said to me, she called me to sit down, and we basically went into the conference room, and she said, "It's not working out." I said, "Why? What happened?" I was doing my work, I was being responsible, I even worked late, and I was doing the best that I could under the circumstances. And she gave me an answer that didn't sit well with me because I was really upset. And she said that they were going to go in a different direction. They were going to take advantage of the young employees, and they felt they had more longevity within the company. And I said, "But you hired me under the presenting the fact that I would be welcome and I would be able to present the way I felt. And you also realized that this was basically relatively new to me, and I was going to put my best foot forward in learning as quickly as I could and contributing. But since day one that I started there, it took me a month to even get a telephone. I was never participating in any business meetings, and I was very upset because I felt like I was being ignored. And she really had no empathy whatsoever. And she said, "Well, this is a business decision." And I knew that they were trying to just let me go, and what could I do, you know? So she said, "We're going to allow you to work the following month, so maybe you could go on some interviews before we sever your employment here." And I'm thinking in my mind, how am I going to get a job within a month's time while I'm still committed here as an employee working the same hours. And usually when you work from 9 to 5 or 6, where does it leave you time to go on interviews? And usually prospective employers want you to be there early in the morning, the very latest maybe in the early afternoon. So it really affected me to the point where I was getting emotionally depressed. I felt like my world was caving in on me, and I had my son's struggles with autism. I had the burden of paying all my bills, and now I was being thrust into uncertainty. So a week before the month had come to a close and I was preparing to leave, within a week, I was having difficulty sleeping the night before going to work, knowing there was only one more week I had, and I wasn't able to go on interviews. And so when I got to the office, I said hello to all the employees and the office manager. And as I turned to work at my desk, I just fainted. I fell to the ground. And the office manager panicked, as well as the employees within the immediate work area. And I was unconscious at the time, but they managed to bring me over to a couch, and they tried to awaken me, and I did come to eventually, not sure how long, and they initially gave me water, and I was saying, well, I need to get back to work now, and they said, no, you can't go to work in your condition. We're calling to get you taken to a hospital. So, this was like a nightmare, because I was knowing that I was going to be leaving in a week's time, and now I had to go to the hospital because of my unfortunate fall. And before I knew it, the emergency services were there, the paramedics, and they put me on a stretcher and they carried me up the stairs, because we worked in the lower basement area. And there were many paramedics and police officers that took me up the stairs in the stretcher, and they brought me to where the ambulance was. While I was very self-conscious, I saw everybody like huddled around saying, what happened? And they took me to Bellevue Hospital in the city. And at Bellevue, they were first admitted me into the hospital to do necessary x-rays and scans for potential damage in falling. And once they cleared me medically, they transferred me over to their psychiatric department, where I was interviewed by the doctors, the nurses, and within a couple of days of being there, the doctor would have a meeting with me, and he told me, diagnosing me in the meeting with him, that I had bipolar disorder, and I also had gender dysphoria. And the very first day I was admitted, they got in touch with my wife, and she had come that night with my son, and briefly we spoke. I was in the bed, and they were concerned, and then they couldn't see me other than that night, because my wife worked, my son was in school, and the fact that it was in the city and we live in Long Island. So basically, that was the only visit that they had with me. And then when they could speak to my wife, they got her on the phone, and basically we spoke, and they informed her my diagnosis. And I was there for roughly 12 days. Um, so I reached out to some of the people that I did tax returns for, because it was during tax season. It was like the last week of tax season. So I unfortunately had to make phone calls to tell my clients that I could no longer do the tax returns because I wasn't going to be out in time. And all they were concerned about was my health. And they said, don't worry about it. We'll find a way. Just focus on you and healing. So during my stay in the hospital, they had social workers, they had counselors who would sit with me, and I would go over basically what was going on with me, my intentions of what I was doing, and they noticed that I was presenting as a female, and they knew, based on the medical records, my birth name. And during the days during the week, we would be visited by counselors where we would arrange in a group setting, and they did like music therapy, they did dance therapy, we had creative writing, and games. We played games, cards, checkers, chess if we knew how to play it, Uno, Jenga blocks, and they had books available for us to read. And also we would go to like a gym atmosphere where we had a pool table, a ping pong table, an exercise bicycle. So as each day went on, I was starting to feel a little better, but I had a lot of anxiety, and I was nervous. When they told me that I was going to be ready for release and formulating a plan, they said, we can't release you until we place you in an aftercare program. So once they had a commitment from an outpatient clinic, they were able to clear me to go. So I called up the employer, knowing that they said I had another week or so, and it was already past that, but they said I'm ready to come back to work, and they said, it's not necessary, we'll give you another extra paycheck to tide you over, and you forgot your jacket in the commotion, so you'll need to make arrangements to pick up your jacket. And so I was kind of very depressed, scared of what the future held, and dealing with this issue now that I was struggling with bipolar depression. I knew I was struggling with my gender, so the gender dysphoria wasn't a surprise. And they were concerned about my welfare. So they hooked me up to go to Mount Sinai, and I was scheduled a date, and I had to go in for a consult, an intake, and I spoke to the medical doctor who said he wouldn't be working on my case specifically, but they would set me up with a psychiatrist and a therapist. So I spoke to them for 45 minutes, filled out paperwork, and they gave me a date to come back for the therapy and the psychiatry. And, as time went on, I was seeing the therapist on a weekly basis, and I was seeing the psychiatrist originally for every 2 weeks. And as time went on, I was seeing the psychiatrist every month, but I was still going to the therapist on a weekly basis. So I told the therapist that I was very concerned because I'm having difficulty meeting all my expenses and the mortgage, and I was very scared because the mortgage company was threatening foreclosure, and I couldn't handle that. I was gonna worry about what was to come of my family. My son was autistic, my wife, her mom, and I felt, very scared because we could wind up losing the house and wind up in the streets. So I couldn't think clearly. I had reached out to the AICPA because I said, look, I'm not able to work, and I have no idea when I will be able to get back into a working situation. I'm struggling with depression. I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and I need to fill out paperwork for the application to apply for disability, long-term disability, because working, I had a policy where I was paying premiums for both long-term disability and life insurance. So my therapist went through the paperwork with me when I received it in the mail, and we filled out everything. I put all my personal information. He filled in, what was going on with me medically. I mean, he's not a medical doctor, but he was able to speak to the psychiatrist, and they indicated, what I was being treated for, that I was visiting with them frequently on an arranged basis, and it took 6 months roughly to be approved for the long-term disability. And during that process, I had an attorney representing me for Social Security disability. So I was waiting for them to approve, as well as the AICPA, for the long-term disability. So luckily I got approved for both, and I also got a waiver of premium due to my disability for life insurance. So I had the policy in force, and I didn't have to worry about paying the premium. And that's still to date. And I'm still receiving long-term disability. But before I got approved for both programs, the only source of income I had was unemployment. And that was only for 6 months. So I was getting very nervous because I couldn't pay much with the small amount of unemployment that I was receiving. And I had no idea when I would be approved for the long-term disability and the Social Security disability. So I had to find a way to pay my mortgage so I would avoid the prospects of being foreclosed and losing the house. So unfortunately, I had to tap into all my retirement monies. I had to take withdrawals, early withdrawals, so I was also subject to penalties, premature penalties for not withdrawing at the time where you didn't get penalized. So I had to, like I said, liquidate all my retirement money, and I basically had to close out my savings also. And I paid what I could afford on the mortgage. I was like 7 months behind already, and they were ready to foreclose on me. So I was very lucky, though, that they didn't hold me to paying off the balance of the mortgage. And then I got the mortgage up to date after doing all of that. And at least I had a sigh of relief. But those obligations were still going to be part of my situation, and I wasn't healthy to work. But at least when I got approved for the 2 forms of disability, I was able to meet all of my expenses, even though the combination of the 2 were less than the previous salary that I was earning. So I was really tight, basically living from month to month with my disability income. Thank God that I had the help from my therapist, because he was very thorough in helping me complete all the necessary forms and paperwork. And I was seeing the therapist on a regular basis. I started to develop a relationship with, he was helping guide me, and he knew my personal situation, that in addition to bipolar, transgender, because I had expressed to him that I was hoping eventually to do surgery to feminize my body, so to speak, bottom surgery for transgender women. So I was going there for the 3 years that he was able to see me, and the psychiatrist. The psychiatrist would change over time. There was a lot of turnover. One of the initial psychiatrists I was seeing retired. Then I was seeing another psychiatrist, and they basically saw me, or she saw me for like 4 months, and then I got another psychiatrist. And when all was said and done, I must have seen 5 different psychiatrists. But throughout that 3-year period, I was seeing my therapist. He was consistent from day 1 to the end when he could no longer see me. So when I was going to Callan Ward, I told them that I no longer was seeing my therapist or my psychiatrist at Mount Sinai, because they were moving on to a different department, and they were no longer able to see me. And I needed them because I had to provide proof for my long-term disability with the AICPA that I was considered medically unable to work. So it was incumbent upon me to get the proper therapy and psychiatry that I needed, and that they would provide the necessary proof in response to the papers they would send. And my doctor at Callan Ward, who originally prescribed me on hormones back in September of 2012, I was let go from my last position in April of 2013. So she recommended me see the therapist and psychiatrist at Callan Ward. So I started to see them, and everything was smooth. It was a good transition. They got all my records, and I was probably seeing them for about 18 months when I got news that they could no longer see me, because in the beginning they only accepted Medicare. I did have Medicare, but I was also on my wife's private plan. So the Medicare was not primary, it was secondary. And they really didn't have any contracts with other private insurance companies. They basically only accepted Medicare. So when they realized that the Medicare wasn't paying the bills because they were secondary, they said they could no longer see me. And I said, but we were seeing each other. You knew my health insurance. And they said, yeah, but unfortunately your Medicare was secondary and we need Medicare to pay. And they weren't paying. And we weren't getting paid from your private health insurance provider. So I was going back to the drawing board to figure out what to do. And luckily I found my way back to Mount Sinai because they had a transgender support department where they had all various departments catering to the health of a transgender patient. They had the therapy, the psychiatry, they had prep for surgery. So when I first went there, I was hooked up with her psychiatrist, and I went on a waiting list for that therapist. So I felt very comfortable, and I'm still with my psychiatrist there, it's the same psychiatrist. And as time progressed, I was seeing the psychiatrist, but I didn't have any therapist. And we made the smooth transition where he would fill out the necessary paperwork for the long-term disability provider. And I said, is there any way I can get a therapist? And he suggested that I go outside of Mount Sinai to get a therapist. And he had me see therapists within the city. And, I live in Long Island, and I had preferred maybe I go there, but I didn't want to change my psychiatry to Long Island because I was hooked up to the transgender support clinic, and I wanted to be there because I also had intentions of doing the transgender surgery. So I finally found a therapist, but they didn't accept insurance. I went there a couple of times, but I had to pay a substantial amount of money, so I really couldn't continue. So I had to find another therapist that took private health insurance. And I went to another therapist, but they were similar to the previous therapist. They also didn't accept they did. I'm sorry. They did accept my private insurance. However, I had to pay a substantial copay and they wanted to see me on a weekly basis. So I had to pay a $50 copay. And basically I was just getting by. And you're talking about $200 a month. And really, I couldn't spare that. So I had to be honest and say, look, I cannot continue because I can't afford to pay the copay. And they tried to work out an arrangement, sliding scale, but when I filled out the paperwork with my income, even though it wasn't anywhere near what I used to make when I was working, so they considered it was on the higher, they considered it was too high to get sliding scale. So I had to continue paying that $50 copay. And then eventually I just couldn't. So I had to tell the receptionist that I can no longer come because I can't afford that copay. So I was without a therapist for like a year, but I was still seeing the psychiatrist. And then I was also having a social worker come to my house on a monthly basis, checking up on me, making sure things were working out for me. And she found a way to connect me with a therapist within the organization she worked at. And she was really good. She helped me a lot. And she filled out all the paperwork that I needed. She gave me a lot of guidance. and she was very supportive. And I was lucky that she got involved because she helped me get a therapist. So I'm seeing that therapist now, and I've been seeing the therapist now for over a year. So now I have a psychiatrist in place, I have a therapist in place, and just the other day I received paperwork that needs to be completed by my psychiatrist and my therapist to extend my benefits for long-term disability. And the thing that I'm worried about is my long-term disability is going to turn out. And if everything goes according to plan and they pay me out to the maximum contract date, I will still have 5 years left on my mortgage. And my Social Security disability isn't enough to just pay the mortgage. So basically I wouldn't be able to continue paying the mortgage, and there was no way that I could possibly over time find a way, because I've been out of work for a number of years. I'm struggling with depression. I was admitted to hospitals in the aftermath of my first hospitalization, roughly 30 times, maybe even more, and maybe 6 admissions. I've been to South Oaks. I've been to Nassau University Medical Center. I've been to Mount Sinai. I've been to where else? Well, initially I was at Bellevue, so that's Mount Sinai, Bellevue, Nassau University Medical Center, and South Oaks. Oh, and Stony Brook. And it was difficult. And the police would come to my house on many occasions because when talking to third parties, for instance, unemployment, when I was receiving that, they said I had to prove that I was going out actively searching for a job, and I was in no condition to. So they were threatening that I would have to come off of the unemployment. And that was my only source of income at the time. So I said to them, look, if you take me off of that, knowing that I'm not able to go back to find work right now, given my mental state and emotional state. So I said to the representative on the phone, not that it was going to help anyway, but I said something to the effect, well, what do you want me to make a decision that would not be favorable, maybe take my life? So when they said, when the representative heard that, she put me on hold. And then she got back on the phone and she said, we're going to continue, you don't have to worry. And before I knew it, there was a knock on my door, and there were police officers. And I said, what is the matter? And they said that we received a call that you are in distress, you made a suicide attempt, you made a threat that you would take your life, so we need to get you evaluated medically. And that was the first time of many times that the police were at my house. So after getting a letter from my therapist at Mount Sinai, prior to having to shift around and go to other therapists and all, that therapist was my very first, and I was seeing him for 3 years. In the end, I asked him I needed a letter, and he did the letter for me to have surgery. He indicated it was medically necessary. Unfortunately, when I was speaking to the surgeon at Mount Sinai, we had a date set in October of 2017. When he found out that I was in the hospital up to, I was there for 2 weeks, and I was released in September. And he found out because they had to reach out to my support system. And he told me, we're going to have to postpone your surgery because we don't think you're stable enough to do the surgery. So I was heartbroken, but I guess I had no choice, or they had no choice, and they were looking out for my best interests. So I was heartbroken, but I guess I had to go forward and move on. And I'm jumping around kind of, but I was going through a depression. My son was sad. He always would say, I wish that my dad would come back. I miss him. And I would always say, but I am your dad. It doesn't matter that I look different. I will always be your dad. I will always be supportive. And then on Father's Day of 2018, he really got upset emotionally, and he said, where's my dad? I miss him so much. And I was heartbroken. I didn't know what to do. Plus I was getting the cold shoulder from my sisters. They didn't invite me or the family to family functions, but they were, my two sisters had joined in many occasions, but I wasn't invited. So, in trying to please my sisters with the hope that they would start inviting my family and I, and then my son, and I'm not blaming my son, obviously, because I understood the perspective he was coming from. So I naively, I went to my hairstylist and I said, I'm having a lot of emotional issues, and I said, maybe it's best if you cut my hair short. And she said, are you sure? And I said, and she said, are you sure you want to do this? And I knew I didn't really want to do it, but I felt I had no choice. So begrudgingly, I went through with the short haircut, and I didn't look anything like a girl anymore. And I knew that I couldn't wear a dress going there with the intention of getting my hair cut short, because I was afraid what I would look like. So I wore a baggy shirt and a pair of pants, and I was miserable. But I thought I was doing the right thing. And when she finished cutting my hair, she said, we need to change your hair color because you got patches of brown, patches of blonde, and it just doesn't look right. And then she asked me, do you want to go with the brown now? And I guess I said, you know best. So she used the dye to color my hair brown, to cover up all the patches. And when I looked in the mirror after she did the hair coloring, I was crushed. I no longer looked like a female. I couldn't present as one even if I wanted to. And I just got so depressed. But I thought, I was doing this because I love my son, and I was trying to get in the good graces of my sisters. But I was heartbroken. I was devastated because now I felt trapped. I had to wear men's clothes. I could no longer wear dresses or anything feminine. And basically, all I had were women's clothes. So I had to go to Walmart to buy a few pairs of pants and a few shirts that had to be baggy because I needed to cover over my chest development. And I wasn't going to bind. So after 2 weeks of going through that, I spoke to my psychiatrist and I said, I'm very depressed. I really need to see you. And I said before I hung up with him, I look totally different from what you remember of me. So when I went to see him, he called me to go to his office in the waiting room when I was sitting, and he said, Emily. And then I got up and I went, and he really didn't say anything about my looks. He just said, he treated me like he would normally treat me. And we sat together and he asked, so what's going on with you? And I said, well, obviously you see now how I look. You see me not wearing any women's clothes now. And I said, I'm like very depressed. I can't deal with this anymore. And I had to cancel my surgery even the second time around because I didn't look the way I wanted to. And I said, I hope everything is not working out the way I wished it would. And he let me cry. He let me get my emotions out. And I said, I wish I could be the way I want to be. I don't want to pretend again. I don't want to go through that. So he said, do what you have to do. If you feel comfortable in dressing like a woman, you do it. And don't care what other people say or think. And I said, but, my son, I feel very bad for him because he says he misses his dad. And he said, your son will eventually come around. You have to be happy. You can't please others, But he understood my rationale for my son. He understood completely. But I left there saying maybe I can go back and dress even though I don't look like a female. And I was trying to get a wig again, but I just couldn't because when my hair was long, when it was down to my shoulders, I was so happy I no longer needed a wig. And I just didn't want to wear one. Because in my early stages of transition, I had no choice but to wear a wig, and I didn't want to go back to that. So I just grinned and bared the fact that I don't really look like a woman, but I was at least being able to dress up as one. When my psychiatrist tried to tell me, you have to be happy for you, and you don't let anybody judge you. So initially, when I went to see him on a regular basis, I would change in the bathroom, and I would put a dress on, and I had a carrying backpack, and I put my male clothing in there. So for that brief time with the psychiatrist, I would dress the way I was comfortable. And he gave me guidance, and he gave me moral support. And he said, when you're ready, you present like this. When you can come to terms with this and don't let anybody bother you and harass you, or just be who you are. So after a few weeks, even though I still had short hair, I called my hairstylist. I said, I need to come in. And I said, look, I'm not happy with my presentation. And I said, can you please help me? And the first thing she asked me was, do you want the blonde look again? And I said, yes, please. So she dyed my hair blonde, and even though it wasn't long the way it used to be, I felt a little bit happy because I now had the color that I originally had when I was presenting as a woman. And I still couldn't look at myself in the mirror. But I asked her, is it possible that my hair will grow back within a relatively short time frame? And she said, it's going to take a while, but we will work on it. She even suggested maybe do extensions when the time is right, because that's very expensive, when she told me how much it would cost. But she said it's a one-time payment. But I didn't have the $400 to $500 that it required. So I said I need another alternative. So she suggested that I take biotin, because it's good for the hair, the skin, and the nails. So I took her advice and I started using biotin, and she also suggested getting a keratin treatment shampoo. So after a while I started to feel more comfortable. I was wearing women's clothes again, and I was seeing some progress with my hair growth. And I'm not a vain person, but I wanted to kind of look as feminine as I could. And I started to see my hair grow, and I'm kind of happy now, because even though my hair is still short, at least I don't have to be self-conscious like I was. And I could present in that way, and I could go back to the women's restrooms and not even be given a second thought. And I started to feel more comfortable, and I kept my hairstylist, and she's been helping me. She's been a tremendous source of support. And I have my support system in place. I'm seeing my psychiatrist, seeing my therapist. I go to my hairstylist on a regular basis when I can, because I don't make a lot of money now. But she gives me a good price. She probably charges me with like a more than 50% discount. She's really sweet. And I followed her basically. She was working in Broadway Mall, and that's where I met her, because I was seeing another hairstylist who I really liked also. But I was pleased with her because the other hairstylist, when I went to get my hairstyle there, her office was closed. They had relocated from one location to another, and basically I had to always pay her in cash. She didn't take credit cards anymore. So I happened upon the salon in Broadway Mall, and I was very pleased when she did my hair the first go round. And I started to go to her on a regular basis. And then she had told me she got a new job because she wasn't happy there, and she was going to Roosevelt Field and working for The Edge, another hair salon. So I said, can you tell me the location, because I want to go and continue with you? And she gave me the information, and she was so happy that I was going to continue with her at Roosevelt Field. And it's funny because when I went there, the receptionist, I knew right off the bat, because I was going with her to support group meetings, and I kind of lost touch with her. But then when I saw she was working there, same location as my hairstylist, I was very happy, because I told her, I am so sorry I lost touch with you, but unfortunately my phone crashed and I lost all my phone numbers, and basically I had to recreate them, and I couldn't reach out to people because I didn't remember their phone numbers, because I was so hooked on just looking on my list for names of people to call. I didn't have that luxury anymore, and I didn't remember phone numbers. So I asked her the first time I saw her, I said, "Can you please give me your phone number so we can stay in touch?" And she said, "Of course." So when I went, I said, "Luna, I want Luna to do my hair." And she said, "Oh, very good." She just started here basically. Today was her first day. So when I went, I said, "Luna, I'm here, like I promised." And she said, "Do you realize you're the very first client, or the very first person that I'm doing styling for?" So I was her first. It was funny. She was so nice to me, and she was very supportive because she knew I was depressed. And she made me look good. She made me happy. And plus, I was very happy that she gave me the moral support that I needed. And I also got reacquainted with my friend working in the reception desk. And, my son got used to it again. And he actually said, "You look better now and you look happier." And basically, that's what I want. My son really took the reverse role now, where he's giving me support and realizing what makes me happy. And so it was so kind and sweet what he did, and I just hugged him, and I had tears in my eyes, and he said, "Don't cry, things will get better." He's such a sweetheart. I wish I could do better for him. I feel so sad what he's struggling with. And it's kind of similar, him struggling with autism for a very young age, basically since he was diagnosed at 2.5. And I was struggling with my gender identity, and I knew basically at 3 years old. So there's a very similar time frame for both of us. And he was very supportive. And my wife's come around. My sisters still don't really talk to me, and we haven't gone to a family function for over 7 years now. When I started my transition, I lost a lot of friends, and I haven't been able to get back into the work environment. I am happier than I've ever been living as a woman. Unfortunately, I'm also very isolated. I am depressed. I'm hoping eventually to have surgery. It has been postponed for the 3rd time, and I hope it's not 1, 2, 3 strikes you're out. I'm maintaining hope, and the surgeon indicated once I have a good plan in place for recovery, which will take roughly a month to a month and a half after surgery. Surgery will require a 4-day stay in the hospital, and I would need to get proper transportation back and forth, because I would have to see my surgeon pretty much on a weekly basis for the next 2 months. And I needed to make sure I had reliable transportation to and from. And I also needed to have a good plan in place for recovery, with people available to see that I was okay. And that's basically why the 3rd attempt was postponed, because when speaking to the social worker, she determined that I didn't have an adequate plan in place. And I spoke to her recently again for the 2nd time, and when I said I'm starting to find some help, I have 2 transgender friends. One is female to male, and he looks just like a guy, like you would never even know. The other friend of mine is male to female, but she still looks like a man because she's not taking hormones yet. She's working. She's afraid of the implications it will have in her job. So she reluctantly is not able to start transitioning. And she's roughly 40 years old now. So she's trying to maintain hope, and I give her as much encouragement as I can give her, knowing what her situation is. And she hasn't even come out to her family, and she still lives at home, so very difficult for her to just come out like that. And I know, because I've been through that as well. And I didn't even start my transition till I was 51. So, and sadly, it was after my parents both passed away. So, I hope things will improve. I hope my son gets situated, because it's tearing me apart, his situation, where we most likely have to put him in a group home. And he really doesn't want to go, and I don't know, it's heartbreaking. You know, it's just not fair. Life doesn't always dealt you with happiness and hope. So I have that going on, and I also have my situation front and center now, because I really want to do surgery. I want to be happy. And I don't want to do this when I'm in my 60s. It's either now or never. I'm 58, so I want to do this before 60. And if I'm unable to, then I have to come to the realistic fact that I'm just never going to be able to do this surgery. Because I do not want to have my hopes high only to be let down crushingly. And I don't want to, 60 for me is psychological, like 50 was, but I could tolerate doing surgery in my 50s. I cannot tolerate having to wait, even though it's not that far off, to do surgery in my 60s. So my cutoff point is 60. I'm not going to do it at 60 or beyond. Either it's now or never. And people are calling me stubborn now because they're supportive, and they said there's still success and you probably have some amount of time left and you should reconsider. But in my mindset, I do not want to go through this again, especially in my 60s. It's just too emotionally draining. So I'm hoping that within the next year, hopefully in this year, 2019, that I will have the surgery, because who knows what's going to happen in 2020, especially with this current administration. For all I know, they could have hospitals now not feel required to do male to female surgery, or female to male for that matter, because the administration has no sympathies for people who are transgender or disabled for that matter. They want to cut health insurance, they want to take away benefits, they want to cut safety nets like Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, disability, Social Security. They just want to cut, while they give big tax breaks to the rich and corporations. So I really need to do surgery before I start to fear that it will no longer be a requirement, and that hospitals can now, insurance providers can now take it off their list of required surgeries. So I really have to do this now, because I don't know what the future holds. And like I said, when I'm 60, I'm going to be old. I'm not going to be able to age and be pretty for the rest of my life, because let's face it, once you hit like 65, 70, you lose your looks, you lose everything. Your skin becomes wrinkled and old. You have poorer vision. And you can't, tap into the fountain of youth anymore. You're going to get old. It's inevitable. So, plus at 60, I don't think I would be physically able to do such a surgery at that point in my life. The only surgery that I would understand is a life-threatening issue where it requires surgery. And unfortunately, transgender surgery, although I really need to go forward with it, the reality is it is not a life-threatening surgery. And who knows if I'm going to have the insurance in place to have it covered. So that's one of the reasons, the major reason that I really don't want to encounter having to do this when I'm in my 60s. And also I have this overwhelming responsibility to get my son properly placed. So, I guess that's it for now. One thing that I wanted to say again, I've said it a couple of times, but I've been getting support from some people. Not all. I lost lots of friends. My sisters don't talk to me. I don't have any connection to society anymore, basically, because I'm not working. And I'm on social media a lot. So I have the typical, like, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, YouTube. And like a week ago, in the mail, I got an envelope with a card, similar to like a birthday card. So I knew, it was a card because of the envelope and what it looked like. No return address. The signing was just a friend. And it was addressed to my transgender name, Emily, Iannielli. And when I opened it, I saw this nice card, had flowers on it. And I opened it up, and it was beautiful what was written in the card. The individual who was so thoughtful to send me this indicated that they've been following me on Facebook and are touched by my story. And they believe that I am incredibly strong, and they look up to me. They are inspired by me. And when I read the card, they also indicated that I'm a survivor. And towards the end, they said, "This is my little gift to you, to hopefully bring a smile to your face." And I cried. I thought that was very special. And in the card also, there was a gift card to Kohl's, $50. And I wish I could thank this person. The only way I can thank them is to show a video, which I did. I did a post with picture of the card, the envelope, addressed to me, and the gift card to Kohl's. And in addition to the post, I did like a minute video through Instagram, and I posted it to Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Pinterest. Because I wanted to thank them somehow, even though I don't know who they are, because they signed a friend. So I just wanted to reiterate that my gratitude is forever. And I'm very happy that I have people like that who reach out to me even though I don't really know who this person is. And I met a lot of nice people. I met a nice girl, she's young, from England, and we kind of hit it off despite the age gap. And she's been going through a lot. Depression, she tried to commit suicide. She's in an abusive relationship, and she's trying to make it work. And she's looking forward to the surgery. She already had breast augmentation surgery, and now she's looking forward to her transgender surgery, male to female bottom surgery. And she's lucky because it's covered in the UK. And we've been together as friends, even though it's only social media friendship, for almost 10 years now. She's no longer on Facebook because that's where I originally met her. But I'm able to continue the relationship through WhatsApp, and in that you can do video calls. So we occasionally have video calls. You write messages like you do on Messenger and others, so we communicate that way too, and we send each other pictures. And I'm so happy I met her, Taylor, because she's a godsend to me. She's like, even though I look at her like a child, because she's only like mid-20s, and she is very inspired by me as much as I'm very inspired by her and the courage that she has. And I certainly wish her all the best and hope her relationship works out or that she moves on. But yeah, I've been fortunate. I made some nice friends. And plus I have a lot of support from former classmates of mine in high school. And I have some good friends. Most of them on the transgender spectrum, but not all. I also have friends that were very supportive from day one when they found out my situation, and I'm grateful for that. So also I like to write and do videos. I've kind of cut back on the videos though, but my writing is very important to me, and I post it to my social medias accounts. Unfortunately, sometimes I get very deep in my writings, and sometimes I do dramatic portrayals, but sometimes people misinterpret that because they think that I'm communicating my feelings pertaining to myself. And I did one post, and everybody was panicking. They were calling each other. They were saying, "Is Emily all right? This scares me." And I've been taken to the hospital on a couple of occasions because of some things I posted or indicated in the video. So everybody was reaching out to me. They're sending me messages. They're commenting on my post. "Are you okay? Is everything all right? Can I do something for you?" And one of my friends, a guy that we used to get together and we had baseball teams assembled where we played pickup games of baseball, he said in a post that he had a friend who was involved in the transgender community, and he suggested that I get in touch with her. He gave me her name and a link to her page, and we become friends. And my friend who set that up, he's very supportive too. I mean, we know each other from back in high school. So I'm very fortunate that I do have some good friends. Anyway, I guess I'm going to go, and I'm grateful for those who stuck by me. Thank you. Bye. Emily, Iannielli. Love you guys.